Hello, my name is Timothy Marshall, and this is my presentation for the Design Tradition assignment for Research 6033 Qualitative Research Methods class, American College of Education. My topic today is phenomenological research, and I will look at the history, unique characteristics, outstanding researchers currently using the method, implementation steps, and interesting facts. Though the history of phenomenological research goes back further than Husserl, I decided to focus on just the modern era because of the wealth of information that has passed in the last 100 years. And that includes what many consider to be the father of current phenomenological research, Edmund Husserl, and his general introduction to pure phenomenology in 1913. The other members listed here are all somehow related to Husserl's work, and their works also may not fit along a specific timeline, but here I'm showing them and their relationships and their works. And the first one I discovered was Edith Stein, who in 1922 was working with Husserl, and her treatise was titled The Contributions to the Philosophical Grounding of Psychology in the Human Sciences, in which she heavily referenced Husserl's work. Maurice Merleau-Ponty in 1945 released Phenomenology of Perception, but he was working earlier with Husserl and with other members of the German Philosophical Society, but his actual first study where he started to set himself apart was in 1945. Martin Heidegger, a very interesting relationship with Husserl. He studied under him, and many of his works and many of his original theories related to Husserl's, but later on in life he tended to distance himself from that original association and started to branch out on his own. From 1927 to 1957 he published various works, and again moved from a prodigy of Husserl's on to being a contemporary, and some might even say they had works that did not agree with each other. And then one that I found out and did not expect to be included in this group was Jean-Paul Sartre, who has a wide array of publications from plays, novels, books, articles, but I did discover that various works of his were actually inspired by Heidegger, and then he moved from Heidegger onto his own theories. So it shows that from the beginning of the 20th century on through even the late 20th century, there was a consistent approach to phenomenological research, even though not everyone agreed with the details of what should occur within the research. There was a nice timeline where we could see the evolution of the theories. Some unique characteristics of this research. These are taken from the website Phenomenology Research Review, which helps us to establish how this type of research is differentiated from others. Phenomenology really tries to understand how people experience a situation, and that information is collected primarily through interviews, one-on-one interviews, and backed up by observations. Because of this nature of in-depth interviews, it's very difficult to have a very large sample size. So therein where, because of the transcribing of all the discussions that occur, it's a small sample size, typically 10 or less, but it can reach as high as 25 in recent years because of the advent of technology that allows us to transcribe rather quickly. The interviews consist of open-ended questions, allows the interviewer and the interviewee basically to have conversations around an experience of a situation, as opposed to a set list of multiple choice questions or true false questions. The interview really is a wide ranging qualitative approach to capturing an experience. The experiences captured also, hopefully, with the referenced researcher not showing any bias or not creating an environment where norms or traditions or cultures are adhered to. The interviewee is allowed to create their own story and their own narrative. The four aspects of the lived experience that the researcher will be looking for are the space that the interviewee was in at the time, the relationship to their body in that space and that time, and then also relationships with others that might influence them during that experience, that situation. What comes at the end of this type of research is qualitative data identified as themes. So through the transcription, through the coding of the information, the researcher can find and look for themes that have driven one person's experience and be able to see if those themes are carried through with other people's experiences. So when the question for the assignment is to determine the outstanding researchers, I tended to want to see who currently is using phenomenological methods as opposed to those that were the outstanding forefathers of phenomenological research. So I introduced those forefathers in the history. Here I decided to see who is publishing using these particular research methods in the current day and time, and find out to see if they continue with multiple articles along the same line. So going through various research databases, I found the following. Owen Doody, who has published at least 5 articles in the last 4 years where he utilized phenomenological methods, and they were employed in various mental health education and nursing environment studies. So Owen has a wide range of article publications through a wide range of different environments. So very comfortable with the methods, and he's applying them in different areas. A little bit different approach. Stephen Flynn has 6 articles between 2011 and 2018 where he utilizes the methods in education and tribal research. So where Owen spread his research out between multiple environments, Stephen was very focused on the tribal populations in the United States and their education experiences. But he is an established article journal producer, and was really interesting to watch how his method very rarely strayed through those different articles. Michael J. Gill has published 10 articles between 2000 and 2017 where he's used those methods to research organizational dynamics in a number of different types of organizations, from corporations to not-for-profits. So again, a consistent approach with the methodology, providing a wealth of article publications, and again, I would consider him another person to follow in his use of the research method. Caroline Pitkin, she's had just recent success in the last 2 years where she's used the methods to research mental health in nursing environments. So only 4 articles, but all in the last 2 years, and it looks like she will be an established researcher using these methods, and her articles are receiving acclaim. Like any other research method, there is a prescribed methodology to approaching and utilizing the steps that are part and parcel of interviewing a small group of people. It does, you would think that it's, hey, just create the messages, create the questions and then do the interviews, but there are specific steps that, as I discovered through the articles and have seen in multiple mentions and different approaches, that these things work well. So again, base your interviews on your research questions. If they don't align with the questions, the end result will be a misaligned journal article, and people will wonder why the interviews were attempted in the first place if they don't directly assess the research questions. The population has to be based on the same homogenetic makeup within the sample pool. That's just not only just for phenomenological research, but for all research. You have to secure and define a data storage and management environment prior to collecting the materials. The transcription of these interviews takes up a lot of space, and you want to be able to have that defined and ready for when you move into the data capture. Scheduling your interviews are important, but you also have to allow the interviewee, in this case more than a lot of other cases of research, to become comfortable with the researcher so that they will open up and provide valuable insight into their experiences without the feeling of being judged or being coerced by the researcher. The interviews are in-depth. They have to be conducted individually, no group research here. And the best practices include now utilizing technology to capture all that is said. It allows not only the researcher to be free of some of the raw transcription, but it also allows the systems that we have in place to help us identify themes. Transcribe and code the data utilizing best practices and technology where appropriate. Coding methodologies are available to make sure that the bias of the researcher is not found through the coding of the data. Analyze the data according to best practices. Again, remove researcher bias and allow the coding and the technology to help create a list of significant statements that can be then turned into research findings. Utilize the best practices for findings, maintain trustworthiness, member checking, recheck the findings with those that were interviewed, and then perform triangulation and auditing methods to make sure that the information is as expected. As always, in any research method, we want to ensure protection of our human subjects. And particularly within this environment of research, we want to include the researcher's self-reflection statement within and at the end of the findings. Some interesting facts. What I wanted to do is I wanted to find out how phenomenological research is used and referenced, and not only within its own body of qualitative study, so it's recognized as a valid method. But what I was looking for is I'm a quantitative researcher by practice, to see if there was any crossover or any reference materials. And what I found was pretty interesting. So recently I found a number of articles where researchers are reporting on, like Sheets Johnstone shows, that there are similarities in the way phenomenology and methods are carried out, and Darwinian evolutionary theories are established. So it was interesting to see what was considered groundbreaking at its time, Darwinian evolutionary theory, a hard science of evolution, and now Sheets Johnstone again shows where there's a similarity in how data collection and themes can be found that really resemble evolutionary theory. Joubert and Moran 2 years ago reported on the value of phenomenology in conscious thought, inner thought, and language processing as part of the cognitive science wave that has grown over the last 4 decades. So the science of learning and how people learn, the science of how people think and process language, that there's a value of phenomenology research in those works that allow for a mixed methods approach, and phenomenology is providing a very valuable tool in that approach. And then Cordes, last year established a connection of connections and also barriers between phenomenology and scientific research. So these connections are similar to those seen supported by Sheets Johnstone and Joubert and Moran, where that in a mixed methods environment, more information can be gained through the use of phenomenology and a select participant pool that can be borne out from a larger pool of scientific research. So it was really, to me, these are interesting facts, because I thought, qualitative was qualitative and quantitative was quantitative. And even though mixed methods were and a practiced approach, they were still, I'll use both methods, but what we're finding out is that some of these methods, and phenomenology in particular, allow for significant crossover and much more of a relationship building research than I previously thought. So, it's interesting facts to me. Don't know if they'll be interesting facts to you, but it's, we won't know that until you all take a look at the presentation and let me know. So that's it. Here are my references. Again, most of these, I think all of them are from academic journals. So I feel that they are valuable in my research. Looks like I'm leaning more towards a phenomenological approach for my concept paper, and it will be my primary method of study, but it might end up being a mixed methods dissertation where I will heavily weigh on phenomenological research and only use the quantitative research to help set the stage of the size of the population that I am investigating with regards to first generation college students. So thank you for allowing me to have the time to present, and good luck in your own research.